Okay, so first up, I'm Andrew Ellery, I'm from icare and the Community Impact team. The rules of engagement, I guess, for today, I think it's really we need to make clear that it is a safe space. There are no foolish questions here. There's no judgment, and the kind of Chatham House rules apply, so feel free to talk and you can take information away here from each other, but don't refer to who said that. It's kind of a little closed space for us to be free, so I think that's really important as we go on. And I'd just like to say up front, I'm not a clinician, so I know there's quite a few health workers here, so I'm coming from a point of view of life experience, but also what I've picked up along the way. I've had a range of jobs. I started as a tradie, a failed tradie, a bad plumber, a bad electrician, a good musician, but eventually I found my way into the social sector and I realised I could relate to people. And all the way along there I've been interested in not only connecting with people but in mental health and well-being, whether it's on a work site or whether it's in an office. So that's the place where I'm coming from, and I'll talk a bit more about my experience later. So, biopsychosocial. This is a great model. This is a model introduced by, I think, George Engel in 1977. But what it does there is, this is what icare use, and it's what many, it's the framework that's widely used, really. And I think I like this one because we know that health and well-being, mental health and well-being, is much more than just physical health. It's a complex interplay there between the biological, the emotional, the cognitive, the social and the environmental. And as you can see there, health sits in the centre there. I think traditionally we've worked well on biological or physical health. Just at the moment we've got Get Healthy at Work, which is a New South Wales government initiative. Every business is entitled to that service free of charge. And I think if you want information on that we can drop you that. But on that physical side, I think it's worth saying that both the physical or biological and the social really do impact on the psychological or mental health. It's really all of those. And I think that's important that we start off from that understanding. The other thing I think is worth thinking when we look at that model in our lives and then we think about how often we're at work. It's a third of our adult life, or a lot of us, is at work. So that's a huge area there. It's a huge area to actually influence in the positive someone's life and their family members. And you get a lot more out of a person when you give that. You get a lot more respect back, and we'll be going into that later. So I've talked about the biological there. The social, before I move into the psychological, I'll just talk about social because it's an emerging area. I'm glad to say our team in Community Impact team in icare kind of leading the way here. We've realised that we've done a literature review and we've realised that social connection affects massively psychological safety and health in the workplace. Social connection and relationships give us a sense of belonging, a sense of worth and a sense of security. And there's some of the conditions that if you've got them, whether you're a small business, just 2 or 3 of you, or whether you're a huge business, if you've got them in the workplace, those conditions to start with, you're already really high up there on getting towards a mentally healthy workplace. And lastly, I'd just like to say, you know, when we look at psychological, I think there's been an absolute sea change in the last 3 years. Completely different. 3 years ago I was working at the New South Wales Mental Health Commission on their wellbeing framework, and I was trying to talk to employers and CEOs about how that would work in a practical sense. I couldn't get in to see hardly any, too busy, it's not a priority. You fast forward 3 years and they're not exactly knocking my door down, but there is a steady stream of influential senior leaders who now understand the importance of this and understand the benefits. So it's absolutely the right time for action here. And also the New South Wales Government has just launched the Mentally Healthy Workplace Strategy, of which I'm a part, and the speeches I do around the state on social connection is a big part of that. Anyway, that's set the scene, or hopefully. And I did want to mention one last thing. It's Are You OK Day, and I think that really needs to be acknowledged. It's a fantastic initiative. I'll be going to an Are You OK breakfast after, I'll be full of breakfast, won't I, at the end of the day. But I think it's really important that we look after our colleagues, and that's all part of being a mentally healthy workplace. So I'm going to amble through a few truths about mental illness, and then I'm going to talk to you about why it's good for business, and then what we can actually do in the workplace to make that a reality. Okay, so this is I like this. You might have seen this in various forms. This one's from England. But the best way to think of mental health as physical health is on a continuum. I think it's worth noting that mental health and well-being is dynamic. You can go up and down that line in a matter of hours, or through the year, through the month, through your life. And I think sometimes it's just a continuum there, and I think when you start to understand that, it helps you to slot in a bit better about what we can do to help people pull them back up. The workplace has a massive, as I said earlier, a massive effect on this spectrum. We can not only affect this negatively through poor work design, stress, non-flexible hours, but we can actually affect this positively. So if we get it right at home, it actually flows through to life. There is no red line there, as I think we all recognise now, where you can just shut off the stresses of your home life or your work life. It flows both ways. And I think as soon as business owners and senior managers, line managers realise that we're always going to take stresses and strains back and forth over that line, then we can actually absolutely start positively affecting it. Now I do waffle on, so I'll try and keep myself on track. Okay, so this, I'm going to come around here and read this because I really like this. Now this just busts a few myths, I think, about mental illness. I won't go through them all, but look, the fiction, only a few people are affected. Well, we know that's nonsense now. We know that mental illness is common. 1 in 5 Australians will experience a mental illness, and there's all sorts of other figures around that to say even more. Mental illness is caused by a personal weakness. Well, that is absolutely not true. It's not a character flaw. It's caused by genetic, biological, social and environmental factors, all stuff that we can help affect. Another great one, well, not so great one, mental illness, people can pull themselves out of that. Again, it's not a personal weakness. It's not cured by personal strength, although you can recover, and that's the next one. People think you've got a mental illness, that's you can't work. But you can work, and you can get better, and with appropriate treatment, you can get back to work. So, I think these are becoming more and more well known now. I think we are busting the myths, but part of the thing about mental illness, wherever you are in the community or at work, is the stigma attached with it. And as soon as we start talking about these things and start allowing people to talk about their own experiences honestly, then we start busting these myths for good. I'll talk about leadership later, but I think one of the real big factors in mental health workplace strategies is leadership buy-in. You absolutely need your leaders on board. And one of the most transformative strategies I've ever seen is to get a leader who stands up in front of his own workforce there and actually exposes his own vulnerability, whether it be about mental health or other struggles in his life. It really can create that safe atmosphere. And we've done it in workplaces I've worked with CEOs coming down and talking to us like that. It's had a transformative effect. Before you know it, everyone in that organisation is talking openly about what they need to thrive. Okay, so why is it good for business? And I'll try and keep in mind here, I realise that some of you here are small business, some are business owners, some are managers. I think we've got quite a lot of health workers here. So I'll try and take this an overview here, but maybe later if we've got any questions on a particular size business, then we can try and answer them. Okay, so return on investment, that's the big one. International studies have said anywhere between $1 and $10 is your return on any mental health well-being strategy or program. That's a huge range, and that obviously depends on what country you're in, what industry, and obviously what program. But in Australia, that's been boiled down to $2.30 return for every dollar spent on well-being. And that's pretty rigorous research, and that's right across the board. That can be anything from mental health training to a formal peer support program, but you will get your money back. The money returns mainly on reduction in absenteeism. So if you've got mental health and wellbeing programs, people are absent much less. That's a given. Workers' compensation costs, obviously that's my line of business, and that cripples many businesses, those workers' compensation costs. So if you can keep them down, it's a massive boost. The big one though is presentism. So for those who don't know, presentism is when you're at work but you're not giving it your all through some other reason, psychological or physical reason. You cannot commit to that day's work. And that is by far the greatest, so it's the hidden costs. People are suffering mental illness and you don't even see it. They're in the workplace now and they're not producing because some people have a mental illness. So it's already happening, so you can't pretend it's not there. So positive return on investment, really, really important. Staff will be more engaged. So look, when you start opening up and you start talking about these struggles in your workplace, and this is as true for a small building firm, say, as a large corporate, staff are more engaged. They actually feel, we talk about that sense of belonging, that sense of trust, they actually feel part of a community. They start giving more. There's some great studies on how much more productivity people give and how much more loyalty to that firm, just in the simple effort of training them in mental health and talking about things. I think retention of staff too. I mean, we all know that it costs a hell of a lot more money to recruit and train a new person as it does to retrain someone who may be going through a small bout of mental illness. So these things really do stack up on the cost department, but they also stack up on this loyalty part. So that's a slightly controversial one, only in the fact that really shows you the cost there of presentism, far outstripping the other costs, and that's quite an eye-opener, and that's the annual cost to employers in New South Wales. Yeah. So employees care about mentally healthy workplaces. This is closely tied to engagement, but this is more about being known as a employer of choice. You know, I think every generation wants to be treated respectfully at work, but particularly the younger generations here, it's an absolute must for them. I was at the conference only a couple of days ago, and mental health awareness and support at work came only second to remuneration in what people are looking for in their workplace. So after that, what they get paid is how they're treated, and this specifically mental health came up amongst the millennials again and again and again. And also there's some stats around 75% of Australia employees say that mental health is vitally important in the workplace. 75%. So the workers out there, including you guys, know this is real, and I think increasingly leaders are convinced over that. Why is it good for business? We said this isn't about compliance, but it is a legal responsibility. We do all have the legal responsibility to take care of each other, particularly if you're a business owner and a manager, but also you've got to look out for your colleagues. There's certain things that we can do that need to be done, or they're not compliant with legislation. It's as simple as that. And I often think about this in terms of, if you think about the battles for occupational health and safety 20, 30 years ago when workplaces were physically unsafe. We've got to a point now where it's a given now. We have these committees and everyone sits there and deals with physical threats, physical risks. You know, I think this is the same battle we're having now, and we're winning it because the psychological threats that are out there in the workplace are just as serious, if not more. There's legislation around disclosure, disclosing mental illness. There's legislation around or requirements around confidentiality and modifications, and they work both ways. It's not just all in the employee's favour. There's requirements on both sides of the fence there, and I think it's worth saying that, because sometimes people aren't aware of what's illegal in the workplace, and Safe Work do have an obligation to check it out. So just a word, you know, not a word of caution, because we're all here voluntarily and we all want to do the right thing, but you know, there is some stuff that we do have to do, and there's some great information on this side of it on the Heads Up website. So, positive social aspect. Now this is really important when we come to civil society, I think. You know, and I hear from business owners and employers saying, look, we can't affect everything. You know, we're here to make money. The only reason we can employ people is because we are making money. Well, that goes to the earlier point of this is good for economic business, but this, I think, goes to a wider point. Diversity and inclusion. It's a positive social impact. You can actually affect, as I said earlier, not only the families of workers that work with you and their children, but the community, and we all live in community. The ripples out from a mentally healthy workplace are really quite substantial. And we know that the community likes to see themselves reflected in businesses. The more diverse, the more inclusive you are, I think the more comfortable the customer feels. And it's just good business. Okay, alright, so that's some of why mentally health workplace is good for business. I just want to talk about the how really. How does that come about before I move on to the specifics of what. I've seen many diagrams like this. I could have chosen from about 24, I think. But really all of them have an element of this, which is the promotion of positive mental health. So this is the positive stuff, the mental health and well-being, what you can do to really thrive. But they also have a protective factor there where you need to work on the culture, organisational culture. You need to work on anti-bullying strategies and address risks and protective factors. The third sphere there is support. So when people, or early intervention, when people do feel at risk, you actually put stuff up there in front. You talk about this stuff, you offer stuff, and there's so much support out there now, from helplines to face-to-face support to digital reading. It really is a great time if you want to get yourself mental health literate. And in the middle there is improve understanding, and again this relates to stigma. The more we work on this, the more the walls fall down and the more people are open. Okay, now this is a busy slide, but this is another way of looking at it. And I like this one. This is from Sam Harvey's work from the Black Dog Institute. A healthy worker, you can move up and down again here, but there's primary intervention, secondary and tertiary. And if you look at it from that point of view, you can affect the whole journey there. And if you do the work up front, you're much more less likely to have to do the work down this end. But you can see that one, number 6, running along the bottom there, and that's around increasing awareness and reduces stigma. So all of those strategies all work to affect that change in the end there. I can make the slides available if you're interested. Hopefully I've got a reference list too, because I've shamelessly picked these from right around the state, because there is so much great information out there. So what can we do then? What do we do in the workplace? What are the practical stuff? The next 3 slides come from Heads Up, which is a lovely site. It's a site for the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance. It's Beyond Blue, a part of that, PwC. There's quite a few different partners there. But I like this because it's nice and simple, and this really paints the picture as what you can do practically. So, prioritising mental health. So you provide mental health education at all levels. So this is about raising awareness, and this is the one that if staff see this, they're more likely to change. They're more likely to stay with your organisation. They're all more likely to be engaged and loyal. It's really, really easy stuff. There's some great training out there, everything from mental health first aid, which is a 2-day Australian design course that's gone around the world to great acclaim. And that really lays out, it busts some of the myths about mental health, but it also gives you some of the practical strategies to talk to people about you know, their own mental health, and to consider your own as well. I think that's important when we're talking about this, especially if you're trying to listen and help colleagues. It's that old thing about putting your own oxygen mask on first. So you need to take care of yourself if you're going to try and help other people. And that can come in any form. You know, that could be a walk on the beach every night, that could be, you know, your gym regime, your meditation. But take care of yourselves, or you won't be able to take care of anyone else. Trusting, fair and respectful culture. So this is about providing skills and, you know, allowing that open forum, if you like, of the workplace. Particularly with, guessing there's some retail workers here, you know, providing skills how to deal with tricky customers. You know, it's that upfront stuff that we can do which will lessen the psychological injury down the track. And that's an injury that business owners will be paying for through compensation costs. So it really is, you can start to see how the return on investment comes into play. Open and honest leadership, well, that's a given. I've said it earlier. I won't say it's not worth doing it without leadership, but because that would be foolish to say, but it's crucial. If you can get your leaders on board, just their willingness to confront this sort of issues is absolutely transformative. Can't say it enough. Leadership. Good job design. All the research says this is the #1 if you want to prevent psychological injury. Now this is harder in some areas than other, I grant you that. You know, and I still hear from people, look, we're paying them to do a job, they need to do a job. And I think we get that. I think what good job design is about is sharing that load where there's risks and psychologically unsafe practices that have to be done. So it's around rostering the right way, playing to people's strengths, not having someone do that same risky job again and again and again without moving them to a different part of the organisation. There's different ways that you can go to job design, but this is about, you know, allowing people to be psychologically and physically safe in their workplace, and it's around giving them every help to protect themselves, to safeguard themselves. Again, Sam Hardy's did some good work on this, and you know, you can just do a task analysis about a job, and it's you know, the task that job entails, and just check out, risk them, mark them, and you know, spread that around. It's quite simple. Workload management, again, is closely related to good job design, but you know, the easiest way to stress someone out is to give them too much work, and it's counterproductive. There's a lot of research to say, you know, people, they short circuit, and that's when you start seeing presentism, when they just can't cope anymore. So it really is, you know, if you keep that workload reasonable, and people actually feel like they're achieving stuff too, you get more out of people if you're decent to them. It's all simple stuff, isn't it, really? Employee development, meaning and purpose. So we've all got a meaning and purpose in our lives. Some of us, that isn't our job. Someone's purpose for going to work is to earn the money, to send the kids to school or whatever it could be. But you still have ways to make that more meaningful and more purposeful. So relating things to values for your workers is really important. You know, we're all values based, and when we feel like we're making a difference, again, we feel much more mentally healthy, strong, and help people develop. And that might be things that is really low or no cost, and that might not be to do with the workplace. It might be giving someone a skill out of the workplace or time to do that. You know, if you think outside the square here, you really do encourage people to remember that you're treating them as a person, and they give that back. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but this is because it is that easy. We can all relate as human beings, and I think you can see how this comes, the social aspect comes into it. Inclusion and influence. Easiest way to understand what your people want is to ask them. So employee engagement surveys, really, really easy and effective way to find out what's going wrong, what's going right. I mean, as soon as people are invited to give their opinions, you're going to know. And the funny thing is that people with a bad organisational culture, they just don't know about it because they've got no feedback loop. So they have no clue why their turnover's right through the roof. If you do a simple employee engagement survey, you'll soon know. And I think, for me, you know, employers don't have to know all the answers, but ask your people. You do need to know to ask your people. Work-life balance, that's a funny one. I mean, there's still people who, even when they're giving flexible activity-based working, they're hot desking in effect, and they still won't leave because the boss is there. So there's a bit of a movement at the moment about leave loudly. So when you have flexible hours, having the leader, team leader, sort of stand up at that 3:30, 4 o'clock and say, I'm off now. To making it okay, that it's all right to leave. If you've done your work, it's okay to go. And that too can have a transformative effect. And I know that's not easy in certain professions, but there are ways around that. You know, giving people some time for childcare, etc. You know, just consideration of people's life. And lastly there, I think that's lastly, mental health support. So this is about maybe having a few champions in the workplace who are a little bit more proficient in dealing with mental health issues, or you're going to have a mental health first aider. We've done a lot of work lately on peer support and how that safeguards you against all sorts of mental and physical illness. That could be anything from you know, grabbing a coffee, eating together and talking to people in your team, right up to formal support programs where we know that there's research on people are much more likely to talk to other people who have experienced the same sort of issues. Really lovely, cost-effective way of helping people support their mental health, but also creating an inclusive workplace. Look, I've taken this from the Heads Up site. These are all hyperlinks, and there's some fantastic resources there, particularly the Mentally Healthy Workplaces Toolkit. Now, a lot of that presentation did come from the Heads Up site, so if you only visit one site, I would really urge you to do that. It's there specifically for workplaces, and there's a whole host of stuff on there. We've also got many more different resources that we've bought, or we're going to be putting together over the course of the next 7 weeks. And this really is about you networking and looking for support from each other. We've also got a lovely service provider that I'll introduce later that is offering to be a mentor to any mental health concerns from your businesses. So, have I gone over time? Oh, not much. So what's next? I think what we're going to do now, so you might see there's some pens and paper and butcher's paper, so don't get nervous. I know that freaks a lot of people out. They're going to think they're going to have to present. You're not going to have to present, but I would like your input into this. So earlier I said I was going around the state and talking about social connection. I've got 2 questions for you, and this is part of our interactive stuff with the employers in New South Wales, because what we're doing is we've uncovered the research on social connection and psychological safety. We need employer and worker help to find out how that actually works in a practical sense. So what we're doing is collecting data on this, and we're crunching all that data, and we're hoping to make up a template, a bit of a strategy action plan for employers. So your information today is really going to be beneficial. So bear with me, and it won't take long. Thanks, well, what fantastic suggestions, really appreciate that, and we're going to analyse them. So, okay, look, as my kids always tell me, I go on too long, and I don't want to take the time away from our mentor. So, our mentor for this week, each week of the 7-week series, the guest speaker will be introducing the mentor for mental health. So, I'd like to introduce you to Peter from Way to Wellness.
Good morning, everybody. What a great fun way to start our day. Most people know Lifeline through our crisis line, 13, 11, 14 line. Our Way to Wellness service is something quite different to that. Our Way to Wellness service is it's still a telephone-based coaching and support line and callback service, but it's for people who may be at low to moderate risk, or who may have at some stage had depression or had some sort of mental health. They've become stabilised for many years, and then for whatever reason, and I think we've named lots of reasons today why people might become unwell again or things get out of control. So the great thing about our service is that it's free, it's confidential, it's easily accessible. There are some brochures on the table, and all anybody has to do is pick up the phone and call our service. We operate between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, and you can also access a contact form on our website. So if you know anybody who may be needing some support, what we're encouraging, or what we have done as a service, the great thing about our service is that we know that not all websites are equal. So we know that there's a lot of information out there to support people with CBT and other ways to manage their moods. So if somebody is stressed, they may not have a clue what to do about that. So the first thing that we can do is speak to someone and help them identify. Also normalising for people to say that, you know, okay, so you're just telling me that your job's uncertain, your cat's just died, and you're not sure what's happening with your relationship right now. You know, they're all really huge things that can happen to someone, and they might just keep getting up every day and keep trying to make it work, and suddenly one day they realise that it's not working and they do need support. So where are they going to reach out? So we cover the Sydney North area, anyone who lives, works or attends school, from Sydney Harbour right up the peninsula and up to Barara, Wiseman's Ferry as well.
Thank you very much.
Back to you.
Thank you, Peter.